Hi friends, welcome back to 5 Minute Modern. My name is Cindy, and today we're taking a look at the work of Francis Bacon, perhaps the most important British painter of the 20th century. And just one note before we begin, we will be discussing physical abuse and intimate partner violence in this video. As always, I encourage you to use your discretion in deciding whether this video is right for you or not. Francis Bacon was born in 1909, a descendant of the 16th century British philosopher who was his namesake. Bacon's father was a retired army captain turned racehorse breeder who pressured his young son to pursue horseback riding. Bacon suffered horribly from asthma in his childhood, and when he inevitably suffered an asthma attack after horseback riding, his father had him whipped. Things reached a breaking point when Bacon's father found him wearing women's underwear. Though Bacon was just a teen, his father threw him out on the street. Bacon moved around after that, living with a cousin in London who he described as vicious before spending a year and a half in Paris, where he first developed his interest in art. Like most painters of his generation, Bacon was infatuated with Picasso's painting, especially the neoclassical work Picasso was doing in the wake of World War I. Bacon began making his own paintings after moving back to London to live with his beloved former nanny, but his early work was poorly received, and he only painted intermittently for the next decade. In 1943, Bacon began painting based on photographs, but he wasn't pursuing a direct photorealistic likeness. Rather, he distorted the source imagery with brushstrokes so intense they resemble physical violence. This would become Bacon's mature style, and though he honed it over the succeeding decades, he remained fixed on the pursuit of what he termed the brutality of fact. This brutality is often shown in a profoundly physical way in Bacon's painting. Commentators like John Berger have suggested that Francis Bacon's work doesn't evoke the rational philosophies of his ancestor Sir Francis Bacon so much as they evoke literal breakfast bacon, that pink-streaked slice of pork belly. Actual sides of animal flesh decorate some of Bacon's paintings, hung as if to suggest the painting is set in a slaughterhouse. And even the people in Bacon's paintings see their flesh reduced to raw pink streaks, as though in the process of painting these subjects, Bacon has peeled back their skin. This is perhaps what informed Bacon's fascination with painting mouths. He would say he was interested in their gleam and their color, but I wonder if part of his fascination was their interiority, that an open mouth allows a view of the raw pink gums ordinarily covered by the lips. As he rose to prominence, Bacon met the younger British painter Lucian Freud. Initially, they were friends, and Bacon exerted a great influence on the younger painter. One can see a clear shift from Freud's wide-eyed and pale-skinned early paintings to the Bacon-esque twists of flesh in his later works. Freud painted Bacon in a well-known 1952 composition that was stolen in 1988 and has never been recovered. Bacon, in turn, painted Freud as many as 14 times, including a famed triptych that set records when it sold to a private collector for $142 million in 2013. Still, as the years passed, their friendship grew into a rivalry, and eventually they fell out with each other completely for reasons that are somewhat unclear. Historian Sebastian Smee notes that an early break occurred between Bacon and Freud in the 1950s, when Bacon began a relationship with the ex-RAF pilot Peter Lacey. Deeply traumatized by the experience of aerial combat during the London Blitz, Lacey was cruel and abusive. Both he and Bacon drank heavily during their relationship, and their sadomasochistic practices often drifted into outright violence. On one occasion, Lacey threw Bacon out a window, knocking Bacon's eye partially out of its socket in the process. Bacon captured the tumultuousness of his relationship with Lacey in the 1953 painting Two Figures. Based on an Edward Muybridge photo sequence of men wrestling, the painting was shocking in an era when homosexuality was still illegal. Bacon and Lacey's relationship fell apart within a few years, and Bacon took up with George Dyer, a petty thief and alcoholic who would overdose on sleeping pills in 1971 on the eve of a major show of Bacon's work. Bacon himself would continue to rise in prominence, producing some of his best work in the 60s and 70s. During this time, he painted a number of triptychs, including one in memory of George Dyer. For critic John Berger, Bacon's triptychs reflect a blend of isolation and exposure, with each figure alone in their panel but visible to the others. Stripped of privacy, but still isolated. The transparent boxes outlined in many of his paintings function in much the same way, as though Bacon imprisons his subjects in a glass box. These figures' wide-open mouths fix their faces into agonized screams, tortuous but absolutely silent from the outside of their transparent prisons. These paintings are rich with anguish, and perhaps unsurprisingly, they've often been linked to the existential philosophy movement of post-war Europe, which sought to question the nature of man's being. But as Berger further notes, Bacon's work carries none of the probing search that characterizes existential philosophy. Bacon's painting accepts that the worst has already happened with a finitude that leaves no place for questions. Bacon said that he sought to make paintings that struck directly at a viewer's nervous system. These paintings aren't processed through the interrogations of the brain. Rather, they stab into the crude certainty carried deep in the skin. Bacon's own nervous system was shut down in 1992 when he died of a heart attack. Though a doctor had warned Bacon in the 1950s that his heart was barely functioning and a single drink could kill him, the artist carried on drinking and painting ferociously for another 40 years. He existed, as his paintings continue to, with the agonized conviction of the flesh. Thanks so much for joining me on this one. Please let me know in the comments down below what you think of Francis Bacon's work. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something new. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.